Hello, welcome back to the Caring Conversation studio, live from the Care Show in Birmingham, NEC. I'm here with Paul Blane. How are you, Paul?
I'm good, thank you. Yourself?
I'm brilliant, thank you very much. Yeah, busy day. You just heard your voice from the PA system. It's very loud, isn't it?
It's very loud. I teach too much, so
Yeah.
I'm used to projecting the voice.
Right, so, Paul, do you want to tell us who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I am Paul Blane. I'm the managing director. And actually, I'm not the managing director. I'm the CEO of Care Business Associate Training, of SVL Care, which is residential care homes, and a number of tech companies as well. So busy boy.
Lovely, lovely. Well, we're going to talk about the CQC framework. So, love it or hate it?
I love the concept, how it's been delivered. I think there's a lot of confusion around it. But the actual concept itself is good if we can get consistency with it and we get the scoring system right. It's definitely the way forward for the future. What I don't want to see is us going through 2 years of this process for them to make a decision at that point. It's not really working that well. So drawing back and going back towards the old style, which, some people would want, but that's only because change can be difficult. But I think the consistency of knowing what you're getting inspected against the quality statements and the way that they're going to score it and the evidence that's got to be supplied to be able to do that, it offers a lot more transparency. It gives the opportunity that when you have had your full inspection done, that there can be desktop inspections done on particular quality statements. That changes the score, can change the overall grade. That, in theory, takes away the possibility, which has been occurring a lot for a lot of people, of not being inspected for 4 years.
Yeah.
And I think to the general public, which is what this is all about, forget about the supplier at this moment in time. CQC is set up to protect the general public. Well, the general public can't make a real decision if an inspection has not been completed for 4 years on that service. So to be able to be inspected annually or even 6 monthly gives the opportunity for the general public to make a correct factual decision. So the idea behind it, the way it's set out, absolutely 100% behind it. How they're delivering it at this moment in time, that's debatable.
It strikes me that as a system, the new framework is a much more holistic in terms of it looks, and it kind of, rather than saying we want you to be technically good, proficient in these areas, it says we want you to be a good organisation and treat your customers well and treat your teams well, and it's much more based around the kind of holistic approach for business, which strikes me as better. But then, like you said, you've got the issue with the general public kind of not now knowing, the government have literally said CQC are no good, right? Like, what does the general public do with that? Like, I've spoke to someone who works in funding, and he's like, we can't really use CQC's inspections as part of our framework for working out whether this organisation needs funding because the government have basically said it's no good. So, yeah, what do you do with that?
Well, okay, so where we currently are is not a good place. And that's because we're kind of in that transition period. But if I look at it from a funding perspective, so I acquired a care home that was in requires improvement. Now, we've invested a lot of money into that care home. We have won many awards with it. It's got top achievements in all other inspections, but it's never received a CQC inspection in 4 years. Now, the way the banking system was set up was you couldn't get refinance on a property that's in requires improvement. So you have to be good as a minimum standard, and that's the barrier. But then banks have got to look at it themselves, and they're going, but if it's not been inspected for 4 years, how do we know that's a true reflection? This company is able to prove that it's far beyond that now, and the investment is there, but computer says no currently because it was all reliant on CQC. So the minute the government turned around and said it's not fit for purpose, that kind of made the banking system and other finance areas go, well, what can we use now to make a credible score for this business? So it needs to get sorted out because it should be a part of that requirement. And CQC should be going out and trying to see if services are good. But at the same token, you can't leave the ones that are sat on inadequate or requires improvement in lumber because the whole process was meant to be set out that if you got an inadequate, within 6 months you would be re-inspected, and if you did not improve, then we would be looking at embargoes, and we'd be looking at maybe notices to remove registration. If you got requires improvement, you had 12 months to sort that out and get to good. Otherwise, we slipped into embargoes. If you got a good 2 years, if you got an outstanding 3 years, that was the whole concept. So how can a requires improvement be sat in four years from not being inspected? One, that's not telling the general public that that's improved. What about the people that live in that service? Are we leaving them in a home that requires improvement?
Yeah.
And how does that home actually gain the finances to be able to lift itself out of it if they're not getting the opportunity? So when you look at that sort of system, it doesn't work. So that's when I sort of like look at it and say it needs to change. The only way I would accept this change is if it promised that we'd get inspected more. Because as services, we are paying registration fees to get inspected.
So how do you square the circle then with your potential customers? So how, like if your homes are required improvement, but obviously you've got a load of evidence to say that's nonsense, but that sticker is still there. How do you square the circle with in terms of marketing?
You are. It's for a lot of care services. What people forget in terms of marketing is it's about the local community. So if your requires improvement, then somehow you've got to get the message out to the local community of all the investment you've been doing, all the improvements you've been doing, be that through social media, be it through sponsorships, be it through going and giving talks at colleges, schools, community centres. You've got to remove that barrier of don't look at the CQC website, but also you've got to push the fact of here's where we were and accept that, and here's where we are now. The problem that you've got is if someone just goes onto the website to see what your grade is without hearing about you and all the work you've done in the community or following you on social media, how many people see requires improvement and immediately move on to the next one?
Yeah.
Because I bet my bottom dollar it's quite a few. Now that's unfair if a company has proved time and time again throughout those 4 years that it is not in that category any longer.
Yeah, it's a really difficult thing to combat against, isn't it?
Yeah.
I always recommend that you should address it right next
Absolutely.
to it. So say right next to it, you used to say, requires to, we disagree, and say something, and try and own that and say, this is the reason. So yeah, it must be frustrating as a provider then.
It is, but that's why I'm all for change. But the change has got to come with consistency.
Yeah, I mean, I did see CQC had posted a blog a couple of days ago saying, we hear you, we're trying to do things, and just to say they come to this show, right? And they typically you wouldn't see that from an organisation like that.
But providers have been screaming about this. I've come to this care show 4 or 5 years in a row. How many times have you heard me on a stage slating about CQC, talking about the same issue? So when they're turning around now and saying we've heard you, okay, brilliant, you've heard us. So what are you going to do about it? Yeah. Because it's a bit like the person that says I hold my hand up all the time. Oh, I dropped the ball, I hold my hand up. Yeah. Right? That's acceptable once. Yeah. Now I want the solution as to how you actually learn from this. So they want us to have a learning, lessons learned culture, and with that provide evidence and action plans and timescales of how we're going to do it. So let's throw that straight back to CQC now. You're holding your hand up, you're saying you messed up, you say you screwed up on the portal, you say you rolled out the service inconsistently, you said your scoring system isn't working the way that you thought it would work, you're still not managing to get out and inspect people at a rate, there's still people waiting to be registered for dom care services and support services, there's still services that were registered 2 years ago that have never had an inspection. Okay, so lessons learned, is that a viable method or quango for the general public to be safeguarded? Answer, no. What are you going to do about it? We want the action plan, we want the timescales. Stop holding your hand up. Stop. I don't want to read your 300-word apology. I want to see action.
Well, you heard it here first. Thank you very much for coming, Paul. It's been a pleasure to see you again.
And you.
And cheers, thank you. Right, we'll be back shortly with another interview.